Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette back in, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Micheletti, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod, as always brought to you by SodaStick.com. Brandon Mileski along with the great Pat Micheletti. How you doing, Pat?
Good, Brandon. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. It's September, which means it's time to start thinking about Minnesota Wild hockey, which is right around the corner. And we're pleased to be joined by a regular on Beyond the Pod, former Minnesota Wild center and now analyst for Valley Sports North, Wes Walz. Wesley, how you doing? Great to see you. And how's your summer been going?
Yeah, great to see you guys too. Usually when you see the three box like this, we're closing in on the in on the season, so that's a good thing. Summer was good. Went back to Canada for 5 weeks or so. We have a summer place in British Columbia. The shortest summer we've ever gone back for. Normally we go back for about 8 weeks or so. My oldest son got married middle of July this summer, so we had a wedding to come back for, and my daughter, oldest daughter, got married last year. They just had a new baby, so we've got a 4-month-old and the baby here.
Congratulations
here too. So we got a lot going on, and then just finished the Wes Walz Minnesota Wild Hockey School. The whole month of August, pretty much from 8 in the morning to 5 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday is pretty busy. So August is a crazy month for us too. So it's kind of slowed down here the last week. Now that we've rolled into September for Wes and the Walz family.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, here we are. We're honestly less than a month away, and the grind begins.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the players, the grind has been going on all summer just to make sure that they're staying in good shape. And I definitely don't miss those days. But, coming into the season, it's going to be an interesting season. I don't know how you guys feel about everything, but there's just a lot of unknowns, right? Obviously losing Kevin Fiala and the numbers that he put up last year. Can some of these younger kids step up and take a chunk of the pressure that Kevin had to score? Cam Talbot's moved on, goaltending situation. So there's all kinds of different angles that are really intriguing to not only just the broadcasters, our fans, just to see how the Wild can handle all the different things they have to look at this year.
Let's talk about Fiala leaving and how that impacts Matt Boldy. We saw a great rookie season out of Boldy. Clearly, Boldy helped Fiala a lot because Fiala took off once Boldy got called up, was on line with him. But all we've seen is Boldy with Fiala and that chemistry. So when you look at Matt Boldy and he's a young kid and had a great rookie season, without Fiala, do you think he's still a guy who is capable of carrying a line at this stage of his career, or is he, did having Fiala with him maybe make him look better than he was?
Well, I mean, they had something special. Let's be honest. I mean, with Kevin gone now, that duo is not together anymore. So we talked about unknowns. This is one of the unknowns. Can Matt Boldy carry a line? I think he can. I really do. It's a lot to ask for a young kid. He's still a young kid to carry a line. That's a tremendous amount of pressure. And I don't think we're going to be talking about it. If you're the coaching staff, you're not going to hear about Matt Boldy trying to carry a line. He's just going to be part of a line for sure. But he has that ability. He's a 5-tool player, right? He just does everything really, really good. And I think what makes him so good is his ability to protect the puck in small areas and make small little subtle plays. It just very, very rarely makes a very bad play with the puck. He just always seems to make the right play. And because he's got such great hands and such great vision, I think regardless of who he plays with, because he always makes really good plays with the puck, his numbers are going to be there. And, obviously his numbers are going to be even better this year if their power play can get kind of move their way up the ladder. I think that the Wild power play was set around 18th or 20th. So if they can improve on that, some of his numbers will be better. But you can't deny the fact that Kevin and Matt Boldy had something special. So we'll see how that plays out.
Hey, Wes, what was your mindset? I mean, you played in the league a long, long time, but what was your mindset when, I know you were concerned about, or worried about how you were you ready, all that kind of stuff. But looking at your team, from one year to the next, and I get my point is we saw a lot of Wild players have career years, and for the average fan, well, they expect that year to happen again. But as a player, how did you approach each year looking at your team?
Well, I think those early years with the Wild, Mick, we were all, especially the first 4 or 5 years, like we were all all the players in that locker room come from different situations. We were not really established NHL players. So
Yeah.
I was so worried and consumed with my own game to make sure I didn't let my teammates down. I wanted to play in the NHL. That was my biggest thing. And hopefully if I got better as a player, then that was going to bring everybody else along and we were going to be a little bit better. So I think the dynamic now with the players, like a lot of the players that are playing on the Wild now are proven NHL players, guys that didn't play 300 games in the minors like I did. So I think the dynamic is a little bit different now in the locker room with the players that have been there than the players in those early years.
Talk about this time of the year when you were a player, right? Because for a good portion of your career, I'm guessing there's a lot of anxiety at this time of the year, not knowing whether you were going to make the NHL team or not. What was that feeling like at this, when you were at this stage of before training camp as a player? And then at what point when you were at the Wild did that feeling go away? Where like, I don't have that feeling anymore. And how much different was your mindset because of it?
I would say probably when I got into year 3, coming into my 3rd training camp with the Wild, the anxiety was gone because I knew that I was going to be, I was a proven NHL player at that point. I knew my coach liked me as a player, as long as I made sure I come in great shape. But the anxiety in the train and that you have during the summer is always there. It really is. And I think like right now are we about 3 weeks away from training camp, 3 weeks from training camp. So right now as a player, I mean, obviously you're training hard during the summer. You're doing everything you possibly can. But right now, the last 2 or 3 weeks before camp, this is ramp it up time. This is when you're on the ice 5 days a week. And, earlier in the season, maybe you jump on the ice once or twice a week and continue to do all your off ice training and stuff. But now is where your mind is starting to think about that first day of training camp where you're trying to get your body in great hockey shape. You're in pretty good hockey shape because you've been running, you've been doing all the training stuff, you've been skating once or twice a week, but now you're ramping it up. And this is the time of the year when you're just trying to get your body in the best possible shape you can. So, and it's not so much just for training camp, for players that have been around a long time. You're grinding and trying to get yourself in the best shape that you possibly can to make sure that you've got everything you need the last 20 games of the season when your body does start to break down. And the one thing I'll say now with the players now, I think they do more, off ice training during the season than we ever did. And that was one thing that I was a little bit ahead of some of the other guys that I played with. I did quite a bit of it during the season too, so to make sure, but I was older. When I was in those Wild locker rooms, I was one of the older guys. I was 7-8 years older than a lot of those guys. So I recognized how important it was just to make sure you just keep your base during the season. And that's something that's just kind of moved on through the players that play in the NHL right now.
Well, Wes, I look at a guy like Connor Dewar, Duhaime, some of the younger guys, and you know what? They were thrilled to make it, thrilled to get called up, thrilled to be part of a National Hockey League team. Now there might be a little bit more responsibility put on them. I mean, we'll see how camp goes. But when do you think that clicks in to a player like, okay, now I really have to take that next step and understand that?
Well, if I'm Connor Dewar or Brandon Duhaime, I just forget about what happened last year. Like, I mean, you are not established NHL hockey players until you start playing 15 minutes a game and you do it for 2 or 3 seasons in a row. Then you can let your guard down maybe a little bit. I mean, you got guys like Beckman coming in. Who's the other kid? Pat, you know him well, Chafee.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing some pretty darn good things about this kid. Shaw.
Yeah.
these guys come into camp. These three guys come into camp and they outplay Connor Dewar and Brandon Duhaime, just like Duhaime and those guys outplayed guys last year. They got their job. That ain't going to change under Dean Evison, and that's what makes this locker room tight, is because of the internal competition that's been put in place from the management, the coaching staff, and honestly, we all know the great players and stuff. But I was one of those guys, so I'm really intrigued by, just if you hear somebody didn't come into shape or what, like, I'm just like, you hear a little rumbling, so-and-so is a little overweight, just, or so-and-so came in unbelievable shape and blew the doors off. They're always cheering for those guys. So those are the little battles that I love to watch. And to be honest with you, Pat, those type of players are really, the third and fourth line guys. If you can have really good third, fourth line players, that's how you separate yourself from some of the average teams in the NHL. And that's why the Wild have been so successful here, is because of the depth they've had in their organization.
All right, Wes. Last year, 5-on-5 was spectacular. Special teams did not go too well, especially in the playoffs. The power play and the penalty kill. We can get to the power play in a second, but given your expertise when you were a player was the PK, Bill Guerin made it clear to the coaching staff, hey, we need to make some changes this offseason for next year because we have to get better at those two areas. So PK specifically, from a personnel or from an X's and O standpoint, what changes do you expect, or what changes would you implement if you were on that coaching staff?
So you're asking me about the penalty kill, and there's going to be changes. I think Dean and his coaching staff was challenged, to make sure that I know all the coaches probably went back and watched film of the Wild and other teams and trying to copycat certain situations. As a penalty killer, for me, I always thought that the best way to look at your penalty kill is who's your most important penalty killer. That's your goaltender. For me, that's your goaltender.
Yep.
Goaltenders have tendencies. Okay. Played with certain goalies that move better right to left than left to right, depending on how goalies move. And goalies, if they're open about their game, they'll talk about things. If there's a goalie that doesn't move left to right, then maybe we shade a little bit more or he feels more comfortable taking shots on this side as opposed to this side. You shade all kinds of little areas on the ice that you're just trying to pick up those 2-3% during the season. That might mean 5 or 6 goals, right? But it matters. And just looking at Marc-Andre Fleury and getting to know his game a little better than I did before he was in a Wild uniform. For me, he rebound controls is a bit of an issue. He obviously has light pads, and they're really bounce off his pads a lot. So he is one of the best goalies ever at stopping the first puck. I'm building everything in my penalty kill around that. So what that means, does that mean I'm going to be less aggressive? No. I'm still, if the pucks are on the wall, if one goes, 4 go, we're all going. But when I see the whites of their eyes and they're looking up and they can scan the ice, that's my cue to sit. That's my cue to sit. As much as I do want to go. Now, my top penalty killer, for me, is not allowed any higher than the top of the circle. I'm going to give them the first shot, and I want 4 guys there ready to clear pucks and get clears. And the closer these 4 players are to the top of the circles and down low, the easier the recovers are going to be. You have 4 guys, not 3 guys anymore, if that penalty kill guy gets too high. And in my opinion, anytime the puck gets through a box on a penalty kill, the penalty kill percentages, you're just asking for trouble. And I thought too many times last year, pucks went through. Of course, they're always going to go through. You got the best players in the world, but I just think that we can tighten that part of the game up too. So having said that, you have to have players that are willing to block shots. That's the key. And you got to talk as a staff. Like, am I willing to put Matt Zuccarello out there and have his ankles blown off? Now do I got to start finding third and fourth line? If we're going to kill that way, maybe some of my star players don't play as much because I don't need him out for 2 months with a broken ankle. So a lot of the teams that do pack it in, they've got third, fourth line guys because those parts are a little bit more interchangeable. But those are some of the things that I personally would look at. You asked me the question about penalty killing. Power play, I know the Wild are looking around. They're turning over every stone to try to figure out different ways to improve the power play. And I think the Wild's power play finished 18th for me, the biggest issue last year was their penalty kill. It was 25th or so, and then we got blown. I mean, St. Louis just demolished us on our power play in the playoffs.
Yep.
That was a big reason why we didn't get by them. Our power play, I didn't mind as much. I think we end up finishing around the middle of the pack in the power play. And there was a stat that we put up, Anthony, about halfway through the season. I think we had hit more iron than any other team in the NHL posts, and so there's a little bit of that comes into it as well too. I don't think we had a whole lot of luck, but with having Kevin Fiala not in the lineup, Kalen Addison's going to get an opportunity. Mick and Brandon, him carrying the puck up the ice and making that one small play in the neutral zone to be able to get the puck through the neutral zone, I think is going to be something that's going to help this team at a very difficult time. Sometimes getting set up. So. Special teams, man. It's you look at the teams that are there at the end of the season, and it just always shows up.
Let's talk about the goaltending. A big trade during the offseason. Cam Talbot no longer part of the team. Philip Gustafsson will be backing up it, apparently. Marc-Andre Fleury. What are your thoughts on the goaltending going into the season?
Like one of the unknowns, especially with not having Cam here, a proven number one goaltender. Having Cam and Marc-Andre give you, one A and one B, and Marc-Andre Fleury. I guess the unknown and the question you have to ask yourself is can his body handle 55 games? He hasn't done it in 55 to 60 games. He hasn't done it in a long time. So that's going to be interesting to see how his body holds up as the season goes on. Gustafsson, backup goalie, he's only played 27 games in the NHL, right? He's got some decent numbers. I had a chance to talk to Jamie McLennan, who was one of the original Wild goaltenders there. He works out in Ottawa for Sportsnet, and he knows his game very well. Guys had some pretty good things to say about the kid, about his game. So there is Jamie said that there is definitely some upside in him. He sometimes gets I think remember Jamie mentioned to me that he is such a high hockey IQ that he sometimes overread plays a little bit, like he gets there a little bit early. So his hockey IQ is tremendous. He's got outstanding feet down low. Just has to close off a lot of holes inside his body. Sometimes he gets a little loose and things like that. But there's things that there's talent there, is what Jamie was basically trying to say without getting too technical. So can Gustafsson jump? Can he jump in and not just play? I mean, you got to win games.
Yeah.
If backup doesn't win 12 games, we ain't going to make the playoffs. It's pretty simple. You got to win 10 to 12 games to make the playoffs. Marc-Andre Fleury, at his age, is going to be 38. I watched this guy practice, guys. I don't know how he can play 55 games and practice as hard as he does. And that's one thing. I played when I was 37 too. Like, coaches used to just kick me off the ice because I would love to stay on the ice too. And I used to be so pissed because I want to do some extra work, but I get it now. Now I get it. And maybe there's going to be some days when Marc-Andre's just got to stay off the ice and stretch and just take care of his body that way. But so a lot of unknowns, and that's one of them. But it's and again, the Wallstad kid that's probably going to start the season in Iowa. He sounds like he's the real deal. I got a lot of friends over there in Sweden that just cannot wait to watch him in a Wild uniform playing in the XL Energy Center.
Let's look at the division. Well, we know Colorado, right? But there's a lot of changes, a lot of guys moving. Anything catch your eye in terms of the division, and you say, this team really jumped up, or this team took a step back?
I haven't, honestly, Mick, I haven't spent a whole lot of time looking around at what the other teams have done depth wise. I just, you look at Colorado, they're the class of the National Hockey League, right? They just won the Stanley Cup. Nathan McKinnon's, I think his cap hit is 6.5. They're going to be coming into some cap, issues here in the next couple of years where they're not going to be able to keep, Kadri, they can't have him back. Nope. So there are some situations coming with that team too. Cale Makar signing for $9 million a year. What a steal that is. Are you kidding? That guy's going to be a $15 million player in about 2 years. That for me, Joe Sakic, what he's done there and building those teams and to be honest with you, just even Kirill Kaprizov being here at 9. We just think about how we used to, should we give him 9.5? Is he 10? at the end of his contract, he's going to be one of those guys too.
Yeah.
And the good news for the Wild is they're going to have all kinds of cap space to be able to keep Kirill. So the timing was actually genius with Billy Guerin and what he did with Kirill. So, yeah, I mean, we know it's going to be a grind, guys. You got to stay healthy. The Wild's cap situation is less than the other teams, and it would be like, I do believe though the Wild are going to be fighting for a playoff spot. They're going to be one of those teams for sure. But the fact that they have to play with a $12-13 million cap hit less is going to be a challenge for sure. But it's one that these guys I know are up for.
Final question for you, Wes, and I wanted to bring up the obligatory Kaprizov question. Going into last year, I think the question was, how can he handle a playoff series with the physicality and having less space? And I think he showed us last year that he can handle a playoff series. It's kind of hard to dissect a flaw in his game, but if you're looking at a spot in Kaprizov's game that he could still improve on going into the season, what's something you could point out, if anything?
I'm going to spend 20 seconds and think. There is one area that I think he can improve on is he thinks he can make every play, right? When he's passing, when he moves the puck from his stick, he tries to force sometimes plays that I think if he just, like, after he makes the play and he's back checking in his own zone, I'm sure his mind is probably like, what was I thinking? Now I got to play the whole shift in my own zone. He still makes a lot of high risk passing plays that I think that he can even hang on to the puck a little bit longer and try to bring those percentages up a little higher. But having said that, I mean, is there another forward in the NHL that has the puck on a stick more than Kirill Kaprizov? Of course he's going to give the puck away. Wes, he's going to give the puck away a little bit more than some of the other guys. But I mean,
well, you also don't want to take that element away from him, right? I mean, that's also what makes him great.
Well, of course, and that is always going to be part of. Again, we're talking about percentages. I'm talking about, like, if you can add 10 or 15% during the course of the season, where you're not just throwing a puck out front, kind of a hope play. And if you can get a little bit better at that, I think he's going to even spend more time in the offensive zone. But we've all seen him play. The guy's just special, and for me, he's a top 3 player in the. I mean. He's with McDavid and he's with McKinnon. I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care that he's played 130 games. He is special to watch. And it's not just, he ain't a power play guy picking up points on the half wall, one of those type of players. He's a 5-on-5 player. Every time he touches the puck, our fans are on the edge of their seat, including me. And it's fun to watch. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him back in a Wild uniform, because it looked a little sketchy there during the summer, which cut into everybody's sleep here around Minnesota. But we've got him here now, and we're excited.
Well, Wes, I'm looking forward to seeing you back at XL Energy Center soon. It'll be
so
happening right around the corner.
See ya.
I can't wait to see you guys up in the press box too, boys.
All right. Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, Wes.
See you guys.
All right. He's Wes Walz from Valley Sports North. Pat, before we get to our vision for the division, let's tell our listeners and our viewers about our sponsor on Beyond the Pod. That would be SodaStick.com. Go to SodaStick.com to get your original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. If you haven't seen the stuff yet, you got to check it out. All their apparel screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You will love it, and we're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. So use the code KFAN for 15% off. That is SodaStick.com, original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. Use the code KFAN for 15% off your next order. Let's get to our vision for the division. We only have, I believe, 3 teams left to talk about, Pat. This week, we are going to talk about the Dallas Stars, a team that finished 46-30-6 last year, 98 points. First-round matchup against the Calgary Flames. They took Calgary to 7 games, lost in overtime, had a chance to pull off the upset. But a team pretty average in a lot of categories when it comes to goals for, goals against, PK, PP. They do excel at the faceoff circle. They were second in the league, but kind of a lot of mediocre when you're talking about the Dallas Stars.
I think you said it perfectly. Average. I look at their lineup, and now I don't like to use age a lot, but they're, a couple of their forwards are getting up there. And, as much as I love Joe Pavelski and the career that he's had, can he do it again? That will be a big question mark, because he's slated to be on that top line. So you have him. You have Tyler Seguin, who's when he's not hurt. Yeah, but he's not someone that's really scares you anymore, in my opinion. And Jamie Benn, another solid veteran, but not the Jamie Benn that he was 4 or 5 years ago. So I look at their lineup and it's balanced, from 1 through 4. But it doesn't just say, whoa, they scare me. I think their D is pretty solid with, Ryan Suter, Heiskanen, Hakanpää. Esa Lindell is a shot blocker, pretty good defensive player. They picked up Colin Miller from Buffalo, who is a good skater, power play guy. But just overall, when you're looking at their lineup, I think it's a solid lineup. I don't think it scares anybody. But they're another team that's going to be in that mix to fight for a playoff spot. They did just re-sign Jake Ottinger, who we all saw in the playoffs last year, kid from Lakeville. Terrific season that he had. And so they'll be good in the net. So I just kind of put them in that category of fighting for the playoffs.
I find their roster construction to be interesting in that they have a couple players that are clearly overpaid and are kind of handcuffing them against the salary cap. You already mentioned Seguin, who's making $9.85 million. He's got 5 more years at almost $10 million. Jamie Benn, who is 33 years old, $9.5 million over the next three seasons. So both those players at one stage, worth that. They definitely are not putting up the points that would relate to that money. Last year, Seguin, just 49 points, 24 goals, 25 assists. Ben only had 18 goals, 28 assists for 46 points. We're talking about two guys that are making almost $10 million. That's not enough.
No.
That being said, they've gotten a steal here recently from a salary cap standpoint on Jason Robertson, who was second in the Calder voting behind Kirill Kaprizov 2 years ago.
Really good player.
41 goals last year, 79 points. The best forward on their team. I'm assuming he's going to have to get paid here pretty soon. I think he's a restricted free agent coming up. And then you have a guy like Joel Pavelski, who signed as a free agent last year, 81 points, 27 goals last season. And you got him, if he can repeat that performance, and I know he's getting up there in age, but if he can repeat that performance at $5.5 million, that's a steal of a value. So you have two guys making way too much money, and then you have two forwards that have kind of saved them a little bit.
Yeah.
If Pavelski doesn't have that year, and if Robertson doesn't come along like they do, I mean, we're talking about a team that is in Chicago Blackhawks territory with how they are against the salary cap.
Yeah, I agree. And with the numbers that you just gave with Seguin and Ben, that scares me because and Sagan's been, he has a penchant for getting hurt. And Ben is kind of, just by watching him play, it doesn't seem like he looks at himself as the guy that has to deliver, and if I'm the new coach, Peter DeBoer, I'm saying, listen, you got to deliver this year, and 18's not going to be enough.
You talked about the defensemen. They did lose one of their top defensemen, John Klingberg. Moves on to Anaheim. I know many would consider he had a down year last year, though. He still led all of their blue liners in points. But I think that's another salary cap casualty, Pat, that they're paying too much for Seguin and Ben and couldn't afford to keep a young defenseman around. And I know they got that replacement in Heiskanen, but still that's a significant loss.
Yeah, big time. I mean, he's a great power play guy. Moves the puck really, really well. Anaheim signs him, I think, to only a 1-year contract. So, I think you're right. I think it's a big loss, and I am sure that they wanted to keep him, but just couldn't afford him just based on Ben and Sagan's contracts.
You mentioned Minnesota's own Jake Ottinger. He's going to be their number one goalie this year. And you just mentioned just recently, within the last week, he signed a 3-year, $12 million deal. So he'll be making $4 million the next 3 years. Ottinger, I think, is interesting, Pat, because he was brilliant last year, specifically in that playoff series against Calgary. Yeah. He was extremely, extremely good and was the reason that they had a chance to win that series. I never know how to evaluate goaltenders, specifically young goaltenders who flash, because we've seen the goaltending position is just weird. Typically, like if a forward breaks out at that age and scores 75 points, they're typically really good forwards, whereas goalies can flash for a short amount of time and then fall back and then come back. I mean, we Binnington, I think, is a good example in St. Louis of a guy who won a Stanley Cup and then all of a sudden he's not even their starter for a stretch of time. So from what I saw with my eyes, I thought Ottinger looked like a stud last year, but because it's the goaltending position, I don't know how all in I can be on him.
And let's not forget, that is a very small sample size of what we saw, because the playoffs are different. Dallas shut it down, and they wanted to keep it as low scoring as possible. That being said, they were leaky, and that is where Ottinger really shined, right? I mean, He was out of his mind. So we go into a season, and there's an 82-game season, and you cannot expect him every night where their defense gets a little leaky for him to make that spectacular save night after night after night. There are going to be nights where he's going to be, left out to dry, and they're going to beat him, because you're not capable of doing that every single night. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles it. The good nights, the bad nights, the mediocre nights, and to get through that full season of knowing he is the guy. That'll be certainly something to watch.
All right, final Dallas Stars topic. They did change their head coach. The NHL loves recycled head coaches, and Dallas got one of those recycled head coaches. They named Pete DeBoer their head coach. Obviously, I think this is his fifth stop now. Vegas, San Jose,
New Jersey,
and I believe Florida. So his fifth time as a National Hockey League coach. Do you have any thoughts on DeBoer and the style of coach he is?
Well, everyone I talk to says he's a great coach. Okay. But if you're such a great coach, why are you getting fired everywhere that you've been? There comes a point in time where you got to say, maybe this guy isn't the guy for us. It's very, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what to think of Pete DeBoer, because you hear good things and yet he gets fired. Apparently he was the one who made the decision or gave the input of keeping Robin Lehner instead of Fleury. And how did that work out? Lehner is going to miss the whole year this year with Vegas because of an injury, and he was hurt all last year pretty much. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I really can't give a thought on him because of what we've seen.
Yeah. All right. So that is it for Vision for the Division this week. I believe we have two more, St. Louis Blues and Colorado Avalanche, that we will get to in the next 2 weeks. Before we go, Pat, since I talked to you last, the Wild traded Dmitry Kulikov to the Anaheim Ducks for future considerations, which is basically, hey, we don't want that salary on our books anymore, and him clogging up a roster spot anymore. I remember, Pat, you asking me about Dmitry Kulikov during the season last year, and my comment at the time was, I don't know what to think of him. He has moments where he looks good. He can step up in the play occasionally offensively. And then there are just times where he makes decisions. You're like, what are you doing? Like, he was just a very confusing player. Overall, I thought he had an okay season. He got exposed a little bit in the playoffs, and that was bad. But ultimately, this is a good chance for the door to open for Kalen Addison, and he's got to kick that thing down.
Well, if you look at their decor, and what they have coming, he was expendable. So
Yep.
I think two things. I think, with the addition of Brock Faber in that trade, I think he will automatically step right in at the end of the Gopher season. There's no question in my mind that he would make the team if he went to camp this year. Okay, so you've got that. And then by having that feeling, you can trade a defenseman, and you can, in a team that really needs money, they just save themselves another $2 million that eventually they could use at the trade deadline if they need to acquire a forward or whatever the case may be. So I think they felt comfortable with what they have going into camp and the number of defensemen that they have, and knowing what the pipeline is going to bring in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that, I don't know if Wes has inside information or if he's talked to the coaching staff. I know, he's friends with, Darby Hendrickson and some players.
Yep.
The fact that he mentioned Kalen Addison on the power play, I thought it was interesting that, because we talk about what moves in from an X's and O standpoint you can make on the power play. I don't know how much you can, most NHL power plays are structured pretty similarly. I think it's more just you got to have the right personnel and guys that have instinct and know how to find open spaces. I'm thinking, I like Spurgeon. He's a fine player. I like Dumba. He's a fine player, but we've seen what we can out of them on the power play. I'm interested to see if Kalen Addison had a major role, could he take advantage?
Well, you know what? He was great on the power play down in the American League. He's an offensive guy. He ran Team Canada's power play. This guy is a power play specialist. If you're going to look for one thing out of Kalen Addison this year, at times you're going to say, man, he's too small back there. He's getting run over. He's not as great defensively as we thought. I think he is there to help with the power play. And that's why I think he'll make the team. So he deserves a shot. He is an NHL player. Is he going to fit in this organization? We're going to have to see. But if he is, it's going to be running the power play.
All right, Pat, every show we end it with some stick taps. Do you have a stick tap today?
Well, I got to give it to Bob Motzko and what he's done this summer in the recruiting game. He just signed the best kid available, Cole Eiserman, who committed to Minnesota over Michigan, over Boston U, over Notre Dame. He's winning all of these recruiting battles for the top American player in amateur hockey. So, to Bob and his staff, kudos, stick tap to you.
He's got a good recruiting class coming in as well, led by Logan Cooley and a couple other first-round picks in the National Hockey League draft. My stick tap today is going to go to Jack Jablonski. Obviously, we all know him as the kid that was paralyzed at Benilde St. Margaret's. But yesterday, he had the courage to let the world know that he is gay. And let's face it, Pat, I love our sport of hockey. It's never been the most diverse. It's never been the most inclusive. And I think it's very important for people that like Jack, who, he's not a player in the game. He's not a coach in the game. His career obviously is over, but still a member of the Los Angeles Kings organization, and just to inspire the next generation to be open with that kind of stuff and to be who they are. And I think that was very big of Jack yesterday, and I give him stick taps.
Not easy to do, Brandon. Not easy to do. And Jack is, he's touched so many lives, so many people, and we forget sometimes he's a person also.
Oh gosh.
He's
been through a lot.
Also,
he's been through a lot.
So I'm with you.
All right, Pat. Great job as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a great week. Thank you.
He's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode of Beyond the Pod. Thanks to Wes Walz for joining us. Thank you to you, the listener or the viewer, for listening or watching. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Bye.